Padre Pio often spoke about the spiritual shock that follows an unprepared death, and he described it with a seriousness that made people tremble. According to him, when a soul dies suddenly, whether through an accident, a heart attack, or an unexpected illness, the transition is not gentle. It is abrupt, disorienting, and deeply unsettling. The person may not even realize they have died at first. One moment they are in the physical world, and in the next, they find themselves standing before a spiritual reality they spent their life ignoring. Padre Pio said that the first thing such a soul experiences is confusion. They try to speak, to move, to reach out to the world they knew, but nothing responds. Then comes the moment of recognition, the terrifying awareness that their time on earth has ended. For the unprepared soul, this is not a peaceful realization. Instead, it is filled with regret, fear, and a desperate desire to return to the body they can no longer inhabit. He described how some souls cry out, insisting they need just one more chance to fix their life, confess their sins, or make peace with God. But the opportunity has already passed. Earthly time is over, and eternity has begun. Padre Pio said many of these souls feel a spiritual nakedness, as if every hidden thought and action is suddenly exposed under an unforgiving light. Worse still, they immediately sense the presence of God, not as a distant idea, but as an overwhelming truth. This encounter is not always comforting. For a soul unprepared, it is a moment of immense seriousness, accountability, and clarity. Nothing can be hidden anymore. Death has arrived without warning, and the soul must face the reality it avoided throughout life. Padre Pio taught that the moment after death is not vague, symbolic, or poetic, it is startlingly real. As soon as the soul leaves the body, it is carried into a state of absolute clarity. Everything the person tried to justify, ignore, excuse, or hide becomes fully visible. The soul sees its own life the way God has always seen it, truthfully, without distortion, without self-deception. Padre Pio described this moment as the first judgment, not the final judgment, but the immediate confrontation with divine truth. It is not God condemning the soul. Rather, the soul sees itself and realizes exactly what it has become. Faces forgotten, excuses made, secrets kept, nothing remains hidden. The soul sees every good deed, every selfish choice, every word spoken in love or cruelty, every time it turned toward God and every time it turned away. For souls who die unprepared, this clarity is devastating. They suddenly understand the weight of every opportunity they wasted. They recognize how many moments of grace they ignored. They see how God tried to reach them through conscience, through people, through events, and how often they rejected those chances. Padre Pio said that the soul does not need God to accuse it. It accuses itself. With perfect vision, it knows exactly what justice requires. The illusions that protected a person during life, pride, denial, distraction disappear instantly. The soul stands in front of the truth, stripped of all masks. This moment is both terrifying and merciful. Terrifying, because the soul realizes the seriousness of its choices. Merciful, because God gives every soul the truth it never allowed itself to see. But for the unprepared soul, this truth arrives like a storm, sudden, undeniable, and impossible to escape. According to Padre Pio, the greatest shock for an unprepared soul is not the moment of death, it is the realization of what it must leave behind. The soul, suddenly freed from the body, discovers that the things it clung to so tightly on earth, money, status, desires, grudges, pleasures, power, no longer belong to it. They vanish like smoke. Yet the attachment remains, gripping the soul like invisible chains. The unprepared soul does not rise peacefully. It is pulled downward by the weight of its own earthly obsessions. Padre Pio said that these attachments act like anchors, preventing the soul from turning fully toward the light of God, a person who lived for, Wealth finds himself desperately trying to hold on to possessions that no longer exist. Someone who lived for pleasure discovers that cravings continue, but nothing can satisfy them. A person who lived in hatred or vengeance feels those emotions burning even stronger, but without any outlet. This is the panic of the unready soul. It wants what it can no longer have. It clings to what has already disappeared. It yearns for what was only temporary. Padre Pio described these moments as the soul's struggle between two worlds. Heaven calls the soul with a gentle, steady light, but the soul is still tangled in the shadows of earthly desires. It tries to move toward God, but each attachment pulls it backward, reminding it of how deeply it invested in things that had no eternal value. For some souls, this inner struggle becomes torment. They realize they built their entire life on foundations that crumble the moment they die. The panic does not come from God, but from the soul awakening to the truth that it wasted what mattered most. In this moment, the greatest suffering is the sudden awareness that the time to change is gone, and the consequences of its choices have already begun. According to Padre Pio, one of the most terrifying moments for an unprepared soul is the instant it stands before God's truth. This is not the dramatic courtroom scene that many imagine. There is no booming voice, no angels pointing fingers, no accusations shouted from the heavens. Instead, judgment unfolds in complete silence because the soul becomes its own witness, its own accuser, and its own judge. The soul sees its entire life as God saw it, not as it tried to present it. Masks fall away. Excuses disappear. Intentions are exposed. Every selfish act, every hidden thought, every ignored opportunity to do good becomes crystal clear. Padre Pio said that in this moment, the soul burns from its own shame more than from any fire of punishment. It is the unbearable light of truth that wounds the soul, not God's anger. The unprepared soul realizes that every chance for repentance, every moment of grace, every quiet tug on the heart was real, and it rejected them. It sees how many times it turned away from goodness, kindness, forgiveness, or faith, believing it had more time. It sees the people it hurt, the love it didn't give, the pride it refused to let go. It sees how often it lived only for itself. And perhaps the most painful revelation is this: the soul finally understands what it could have become. God does not condemn the soul. The soul condemns itself by recognizing the vast difference between the life it lived and the life it was meant to live. Padre Pio described this as the soul's deepest heartbreak because the truth is revealed with absolute clarity, but at a moment when nothing can be changed. This is the judgment the unprepared soul never expected, a confrontation not with divine wrath, but with divine truth. Padre Pio said that at the final moment after the life review, after the truth is revealed, every soul faces one last decisive choice: to accept God's mercy or to reject it. This choice does not come in words, but in the deepest movement of the soul. Mercy is offered to everyone, even to those who lived selfishly, pridefully, or without faith. But accepting mercy requires humility, sorrow, and a willingness to let God cleanse what the soul tried to hide. For the unprepared soul, this moment is agonizing. Some souls, overwhelmed by shame, throw themselves into God's mercy with tears of repentance. These souls are saved, not because they lived perfectly, but because they finally opened their hearts in truth. But others recoil. Padre Pio warned that some souls, even after seeing everything, still cling to pride, excuses, or bitterness. They cannot accept mercy because mercy requires surrender. Instead of falling into God's arms, they turn away, choosing the loneliness of separation over the humility of repentance. In that moment, heaven is not closed to them. They close their hearts to heaven, and that is the tragedy of the unprepared soul. Padre Pio said that God never stops offering mercy, but the soul has to want it, even in its final breath. Thus, the final cry of a soul is not always a scream of fear. Sometimes it is a whisper of surrender. Sometimes it is a silent refusal. And it is this last decision more than anything in life that shapes eternity.